Hi ladies, Dionysia here. I wanted to take a few minutes out today for today's email to speak to you about inner child bonding. So this is actually a huge part of my work that I do in my one-on-one coaching and group coaching with women. And from my perspective, it's the most powerful, most potent, most important part of what I do, because we all have an inner child. We all have a childhood, right? And many of us experienced things less than wanted in our childhoods. And as adults, we tend to carry those things around inside of ourselves. You know, I always say that in relationships, there are actually four people. There's adult you and little girl you, and adult him and little boy him. And often conflict arises in relationships because the child selves are engaged in the conflict, both of them trying to get needs met that didn't get met when they were children. So when we do this inner child bonding work, what we do is we go back and we help the child have their needs met. And we know from all kinds of studies, trauma studies and shamanic practices, that when trauma happens in childhood, a part of psyche, a part of the self, splits off and hides to be safe and stays there until there's a safe time to go and bring that self back into integration. So that's actually what inner child bonding is about. It's about integrating all aspects of the self and finding the parts of self that got split off through any number of things, you know, whether that's trauma, abuse, neglect, abandonment, even, you know, moving from one city to another, or losing an important figure in your life as a child. So there are all kinds of things that happen in childhood, and we, at those points in time, we sort of tuck them away into our nervous systems, and our body holds it in a certain kind of way, and that child self aspect goes to places in psyche. So psyche's like a map. It's like a land almost, where there are all kinds of places, caves and woods and cottages, and I mean just all kinds of places in psyche where parts of ourselves split off and go to until they're safe to come back home. So what we're doing in inner child bonding work is we're creating that safe home, and then going and finding the split off part and bringing it back to self. And the interesting thing about this is that until we've done that, those parts are actually actively playing out in our world. They're usually running our relationships. That's where we tend to see them most. They're running our relationships. They're often creating conflict in relationships. And we have a tendency to be very critical or judgmental about these parts of self. And or they can have critical voices towards us, because we don't really understand what's happening, and we don't have any languaging or method to get them sort of held close. So with inner bonding work, inner child work, what we're doing is learning to bring those pieces in and hold them close. And again, like I said earlier, I believe this is the most powerful part of the work that I do. It's the most important part of the work that I do. And it's emotional maturation, actually. It's a maturing process. It's finding the parts that didn't get well parented when we were that age, when we were age 7, age 3, age 9, and then bringing them in and reparenting them, parenting ourselves, actually. And the more that we do that, the more emotionally mature we become, because we don't have little selves sort of split off in psyche running the show anymore. And, you know, there's an interesting thing about that. Those parts, 3-year-old self, 7-year-old self, 9-year-old self, those parts, wherever they are in psyche, to them, it's still that period of time, right? They don't recognize that here we are in present day time, 47-year-old self or 52-year-old self, they're still just being the age that they were when the split happened. And you know, psyche does not recognize the movement of time. So that's a really interesting thing to think about in terms of how do we, you know, come to be living age 47, age 52, with all of those past ages sort of integrated. because that's actually what we're talking about. When we have a fractured psyche, when we have parts split off into psyche, and now I'm not talking about things like personality disorders or dissociative disorders. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking more about, although I would say that this is the kind of thing that leads to some of those things. But what I'm talking about is simply not having accurate mirroring as a child, meaning you didn't have somebody in your experience who was reflecting back to you accurately who you were and the experience that you were having. For example, let's say your parents split up when you were 7, they divorced when you were 7, and the parent who had to leave was your most beloved person in the world, and they're embroiled in their drama about the divorce, and nobody's paying attention to you, little 7-year-old self, who's having her experience of all of this and is completely out of control of it, right? So those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about, and how we cope as children with those experiences. And splitting off into places in psyche is how we cope. And stuffing all of that feeling that we can't process at the time because it's too big into our nervous systems for later is how we cope. And so these things are the bases of triggers. So in our retreat in Croatia, we are going to have some inner bonding work. We're going to do some inner child work in a very gentle, loving way, in a very safe container, and in a way that can be integrated into the experience that we're having with travel and adventure and food and all of that. But also, this is meant to be a transformational experience, right? And for me, this is one of the most powerful transformational pieces I can give you, and I want you to have it. So when we're on our retreat, we are going to have ceremonial nights and workshop times in our days, and this is one of the workshops that we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing this inner child bonding, so that we're going to walk away from this feeling like we've gotten part of ourselves, and you literally will. You will have a part of yourself that you don't have right now. And what happens for us when we do that is we have that emotional maturing process that I was talking about, and we also gain more power. So when we have aspects of ourselves that are not fully integrated, we're missing part of our power. When we bring 7-year-old self back in and we love her well, and we parent her in the way that she needs, then we become more powerful. We have a part of ourselves integrated in a huge way, and we have greater power. And that's a part of what you're going to walk back home with after this retreat. So I hope that offers you something today, some hope for life, some hope for your own process, and some excitement about what's possible for you if you join us in Croatia in October. We do have a few spaces left. We'd love to have you with us. As always, feel free to email me, reach out if you have questions, if you are not quite sure, if you're thinking about it, if you're almost committed but something's holding you back, anything like that. Just email me. Let's discuss it. I'd be happy to hop on a call with you and spend 20, 30 minutes with you talking it out and discovering whether this is going to be a good fit for you or not. And I'm just happy to answer any questions that you have. So again, inner child bonding, the power of what we get back for ourselves when we do that kind of work, and how amazing that's going to be to do that in this particular retreat container in a very gentle, loving way, in safety and in trust. Okay, I hope to hear from you. Would love to have you with us. Sending big love your way, and to all the child parts.